بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. We continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's On Disciplining the Soul, Kitab Riyadh Nafs, translated by Timothy Winter, Abdul Hakim Murad. And the last thing that we have read in the last session was a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, narrated by both Bukhari and Muslim, about that nomad who pulled the it is described as a thickly edged Najrani cloak. And Najran is today is in Saudi Arabia. Historically, was part of Yemen, to my knowledge. At any rate, I remember also that Najran would be mentioned in other stories, like the Christians, the delegation of the Christians of Najran, one of the most important events in terms of the relationship with the people of the book. They traveled all the way from Najran to Medina to meet with the Prophet ﷺ, and they were hosted in the mosque. There were no hotels or motels, so they stayed in the mosque, and there are beautiful accounts. Yes, ultimately they listened to the Prophet ﷺ. They went back. There was an agreement. Did not become Muslims. Did not become Muslim, and they were free to worship, to continue with their religion. Went back to Najran, but that event of hosting them in the mosque is an extremely important, a very beautiful aspect of that event. At any rate, that's where Najran, southwest part of the Arabian Peninsula. So that nomad asked the Prophet ﷺ for something. The Prophet ﷺ laughed. He did not reprimand the nomad, as I said in the previous session, and he ordered that he would be given some money as he wanted. So the nomad was rough, he was vulgar, but the Prophet ﷺ did not really respond in kind. To the contrary, remember that this particular title is about the signs of good character, and that's exactly what the Prophet ﷺ, his character was an embodiment of all the ethics, morality, and etiquette, in the Quran. Sayyidah Aisha anha, when she was asked about the character of the Prophet ﷺ, she said, "Kana khulquhu al-Quran." His character was the Quran, meaning his character was the embodiment of all these beautiful things in the Quran itself. So we continue reading after mentioning this very last hadith about the nomad. The Prophet ﷺ, it is mentioned here that it is when Quraysh assailed him with injuries and blows, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "O Lord, God, forgive my people, for truly they do not know." It is said that this was on the day of Uhud. Now, اللهم اغفر لقوم فإنهم لا يعلمون. As is here, it was verified, mentioned by Ibn Hibban والبيهقي في دلائل النبوة من حديث سهل بن سعد. It is also mentioned in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, but the narrator is Ibn Mas'ud, that the Prophet ﷺ said this about a prophet amongst the prophets in the past. His people basically hit him, and that's what he mentioned. اللهم اغفر لقوم فإنهم لا يعلمون. And the day of Uhud, that's really, uh, remember, I think it's a very important aspect of this, of the history of the warfare that took place during the last 10 years of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. It was the Meccan idol worshippers who initiated the military campaign. It was a zero sum game. They wanted to annihilate the Muslims. They followed them all the way to Medina. Uh, the Medina is few hundred kilometers, few hundred miles to the north of Mecca, and the first military campaign failed miserably. Though the Meccans were their number, the number of their knights and soldiers, they were 3-1, but they lost, and they lost in big at the battle of Badr. Uhud, it was the other way around. Subhanallah, there was a Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid, of course. At the time, he was the general, the leader of the polytheist army. Later on, of course, he became a Muslim, and he led so many battles. But at the time, he took a chance when the archers descended from a hilly area. The Prophet ﷺ ordered them not to give up their position, but they, when they saw that, they thought that the war ended, and they were interested more in the spoils of war rather than maintaining their position as the Prophet ﷺ ordered them. Sayyidina Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh, at the time, he noticed that the archers left their position. He circled the mountain and he attacked the Muslims. And Uhud, that Mount Uhud, literally it's on the edge of the Medina. If you go to the airport of Medina, you'll pass by Uhud. If you pass by Uhud at night, it is well lit. Um, it's part of and my advice to people when they travel to Muslim countries that are essential to Islamic history, early Islamic history, in the and try to visit the places and see for yourself. Just get a sense of the place of Uhud, which the Prophet ﷺ, said about that mountain. This mountain, meaning Uhud, uh, loves us, and we love it. Uh, but remember that أحد هذا الجبل يحبنا ونحبه كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. If you go to Jordan, there are ample sites and many companions buried there during the very early history of Islam, conquering these lands, and of course in Palestine and beyond. It was for this reason that God exalted us. He said, "Assuredly, thou art of a tremendous character. وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم." It was so that Ibrahim ibn Adham, the well-known, rahimahullah, well-known ascetic Sufi, he went out one day into the desert. There he met a soldier who asked him, "Are you a slave?" And he told him that he was. Of course, by the end of this story, you'll understand the meaning of the slave here. Where is the inhabited country? where is the inhabited country? أين العمران? Inhabited country, أين العمران? Almost like if you ask, in the desert, where is the closest town? Okay, that's really the meaning of العمران versus the الصحراء البداوة. The عمران would be the opposite of that. And but really there is pun because you would not understand the English will not convey the Arabic because the etymology of Umran from Amara, the opposite of Kharrab, rather than corrupting something, you are maintaining it, or you are preserving it, or you are really Umran is doing something good in this life. Amarat al-ard, doing all the good things in every aspect of our life, in politics, in economics, and the social order, whatever is the activity, according to the best of your understanding of the Islamic worldview based on the Quran and the Sunnah. So he pointed to the graveyard. Yes, and Ibrahim pointed to a cemetery. The soldier said, I meant the inhabited country. The soldier said, but Ibrahim replied, the cemetery is such. At this, the soldier lost his temper and struck Ibrahim's head with his goad, cracking his skull. Then he took him back with him to the town, where he was met by his companions, who asked him what happened. And when the soldier told them, they said, but this is Ibrahim ibn Adham. He was well known. At this, soldier dismounted and kissed his hands and feet, the hands and feet of Ibrahim ibn Adham, and tendered his apologies. Later on, Ibrahim was asked why he had called himself a slave. He did not ask me whose slave I was, he answered. He merely asked me if I was a slave, if I was one. And I said, yes, for I am a slave of God. And when he struck my head, I asked God to admit him into heaven, to paradise. They said, his companions, but he did you an injustice. Someone said, how could you pray for such a thing? And he replied, I knew that I would be rewarded for my forbearance, because he was patient, and did not want to come by something good because of him, while he gained something evil because of me. Abu Uthman al-Hiri once received an invitation from a man who wished to put him to the test. When he arrived at the latter's house, he said, you cannot enter now. So Abu Uthman went away. But before he had gone any great distance, the man called him again and said, O Shaykh, come back. And Abu Uthman did so. Then he called him a third time and said, return to what you should be doing at this time. But when he reached his door again, he repeated what he had first said. He went away and returned a fourth time, only to receive the same rebuttal. The man continued to do this again and again, with Abu Uthman al-Hiri responding in the same fashion each time, simply accepting the order, the directives. At last, he bent down and kissed Abu Uthman's feet and said, O Shaykh, I only wanted to test you. How fine is your character? But he only replied, The actions you saw me do here were no more than the character traits of a dog. For a dog, when ordered not to do something, simply refrains. He did not see something big. In fact, in Arabic, it's more beautiful. Ya Ustad. Ya Ustad. Yes. And this is خلق الكلب. إذا دعي أجاب وإذا زجرا زجر. A different story about Abu Uthman al-Hiri. It is related that Abu Uthman was once riding in the street when a pot of ashes was thrown down upon him. If you ask, was it intentional? People do throw things. Remember at the time, uh, the ashes would simply be part of the road. I mean, if you think about it, the roads were not paved, as most probably. Uh, so people who collected the ashes after fire was for food or whatever. The most important thing is that they were ashes. So once the ashes were thrown down upon him, he dismounted from his ride, from his horse, whatever, and prostrated himself to God in gratitude, thanking God, and then brushed the ashes from his clothes without saying a word, no complaint. Shall you not rebuke them? He was asked. He replied, Abu Uthman, a man who deserves hellfire but receives only ashes cannot fairly be angry. فصولح على الرماد, but receives, of course, receives صولح like it was kind of mitigated rather than hellfire, only the ashes. He should be happy that he ended up with ashes rather than with fire, with hellfire. Of course, the idea is that uh, people don't think of themselves as deserving paradise. They are the believers. It's been between al-raja wal khawf. You are always fluctuating between hope and fear. You hope because حسن ظن بالله عز وجل, uh, and you are afraid because the worst scenario would be hellfire. But always never give up on hope. You don't praise yourself or praise your work or action. Our shortcomings are many, our mistakes are many, our sins are many. كل ابن آدم خطاء وخير الخطائين التوابون. All the children of Adam are sinners, and the best of sinners are the repenters. In the next story, it's about Ali ibn Musa al-Rida. It's related that Ali ibn Musa al-Rida was of a swarthy complexion, his mother having been a negress. كان لونه يميل إلى السواد إذ كانت أمه سوداء. So near the door of his house at Nishapur there was a public bath, which the attendant would ensure was empty whenever he wanted to use it. One day when he was in this bathhouse, the attendant shut the door and went away to run some errands. A rustic then went up to the door of the bathhouse, opened it, entered, and undressed. When he saw Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, he thought that he was a bath attendant. Simply because of his complexion, he thought he was a slave or servant, simply because of the way he looked, and asked him to bring him some water. Ali ibn Musa rose and followed the man's every instruction. Ali ibn Musa al-Rida will be the eighth Imam. If you talk about the 12th Imams of the 12 Imamite Shiism, uh, from the children of the offspring of Ali and Fatima, alayhim assalam. With the attendant, so he followed him simply. Ali bin Musa rose and followed the man's every instruction. When the attendant returned, he saw the rustic's clothes and heard him speaking to Ali bin Musa. He was terrified, the original attendant, and fled, leaving them where they were. And when Ibn Musa emerged and asked about the attendant, he was told that he had been so frightened by what had happened that he had run away. He should not have fled, Ibn Musa remarked. The fault lies only with the man who slept with a black slave girl. Uh, meaning, meaning the his mother, and in fact, the exact wording is about the seed at الذنب الذنب لمن وضع ماءه عند أمة سوداء. And in fact, the name of his mother, so many names really. Probably the most famous is Najma, which would be the equivalent to a star, and Najm. And Tuktam is another name, but as I said, it has been also mentioned that it was second, the Nubian, and they said also that she was Khayzaran from Mercia, and they said also Arwa and Shahda and so many other names, but I think the most important are Najm and also Tuktam. But she was originally a slave woman, but once she gave birth, she becomes al Banin. That's a legal category in Islamic jurisprudence. Suffice it, inshallah, for this session. The next one, inshallah, we will begin with the story of Abu Abdullah Al-Khayyat. Until then, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.